Hello, everybody, and welcome to another wonderful day of live at the Waterhole. My name is Taylor McCurdy, and I'm very excited to host this show. I'm doing the entire Waterhole show today. Can you believe what's that? 4.5 hours of me. For those of you that are not so stoked, I'm very sorry. Hopefully, we get some wonderful wildlife to make up for it, of course. But starting off this live and interactive waterhole show, we're in South Africa at Djuma Private Game Reserve, which is in the Asabi Sand, the most iconic wilderness area in the country, the place where everybody wants to travel to. And we're looking at a couple of hippos. But if you have just stumbled across and you're wondering what on earth is going on and who am I and why am I talking over all this wildlife, this is live and interactive, and I prefer it if I could have chats with all of you that are watching. And there are many ways to do this. You can head over to the WildEarth website and look out for the question tab, and then you can just send questions through that way. If you're watching on YouTube for the first bit of the show, please make use of the YouTube chat. And if you are perhaps using Twitter or X, you're welcome to chat away there too. Just remember to hashtag WildEarth. And if this is your first time watching, I always say this: let me know where you are from, where you're watching, and why are you not working? Not just teasing. I'm all for everybody taking a break. It's a great show to have on in the background, especially if you are stuck in the concrete jungle. Well, there's a couple of hippos at Gowrie Dam, or sometimes it's also called Vuyatela Dam. And hopefully they'll come out and we'll be able to see them a little bit better. But it is crazy to see how much the vegetation has grown, especially around the dam itself. All these small shrubs, there's some bush willows, these big shrubs just in front of us that are starting to grow. And they've been growing and growing for the last couple of years. And soon they're just going to completely cover up this section of the dam, making it a little bit more tricky for us to see. But I'll give it a minute or two just to see who is watching with me today, if there is anyone, or if I'll be talking to myself, which I'm kind of used to doing. Right, while I wait for all of you to start typing furiously, telling me hello or anything, really, we're going to go and just check out what's happening with the weather. Well, it looks like the hottest part of, well, one of the locations, of course, where the cameras are, is going to be in Namibia. Otherwise, everything everywhere else is relatively cool for this time of the year. But how exciting! Still overcast. We've had a bit of a sort of rainy sort of spell at the moment here in the low veld. Well, there's plenty of clouds around, but I don't think that they'll last for too much longer. Leopard Lover, you said happy 2024. Same to you. And you just heard the biggest trumpet ever from an elephant. And then the baboons were barking. And this happened not too long ago. Okay. So we'll probably have a little scan around and see what else is about. You never know what might be lurking amongst the bushes. Maybe a leopard or a lion or even a hyena, wild dogs, you name it, could be sleeping around the waterhole. So I'll definitely keep an eye out on that. And then Shiv, you said it's good to have me back with all of you. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. And then we've got Lucy, who's also jumped on. And then you've asked, where am I now in the property of Djuma? Well, right now we're actually right outside where the Djuma lodges are. So Vuyatela Lodge basically overlooks onto this waterhole. So I wouldn't say it's central in Djuma. It's sort of a little bit more in the western section of the reserve, kind of just off center, if you will. However, I'm sitting at home. I'm no longer at Djuma. I finished up on the my last drive was on the 27th of December. And then Grace, thank you. You said I'm not talking to myself. Phew. I was worried. I was like, goodness, please, can 2024 be a better year? And it already is that I've got so many of you wanting to chat to me. Oh, Catherine, you've also said hello, and it's good to have me back on the show. So does Suzanne. It's great to have so many familiar names pop through. Aha, look at what we've got. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Zumi. We're looking at a white patch on a log now. Now, I know that doesn't seem like too much, and what on earth is that snowball or cotton candy doing on that log? This is actually a frog's nest, for those of you that don't know. I know there's a lot of you that have seen this before, but WildEarth is able to reach millions of people on a daily basis. So for those of you, it's not always about the big animals. We talk a lot about the smaller, intricate interactions that go on within an ecosystem that are often overlooked. And it's one of my specialities. And not too long ago, on my last stint when I was in Djuma, I actually dissected or cut open one of these frogs' nests that were old and all the tadpoles had hatched. So I'll quickly run through it. Maybe for those of you that have been watching, perhaps you can reshare if you took any screenshots. And if you're wanting to see some up close pictures, or maybe even watch the entire interpretation I did, you can head over to Twitter and check out the hashtag WildEarth. I'm sure someone will very kindly post something about it. So, anyways, essentially what we're looking at right now is a nest of a southern grey foam nest frog. And it's so fascinating how this is produced, because we think of frogs and toads, right, and that they lay their eggs in water. And that is true, but all frogs or all amphibians will have a slightly different way of, well, firstly, producing eggs and where they decide to put them. So, this is a secretion called oviducal, and it's produced by the females. So what happens is that the males will climb to the tops of trees, a nice high point, typically a place overhanging water, and then they'll start chirping away, hoping to get the attention of a female. Then there'll be some females that will listen to the beautiful song and they'll go, I kind of like the sound of that one, and they'll creep on closer. And then, of course, they bound together. They'll mate. We call it amplexus. And while they're sort of in the mating position, there are various kinds. Um, the female will start producing the substance, and the male and the female will basically beat their legs, moving them back and forth. And what that does is that secretion, just as if you were sort of whipping egg yolks, not egg yolks, egg whites, for an example, maybe you're making a meringue of some kind, and you know how those peaks start to stiffen the more and more you mix them. That's essentially what happens here. And when it gets to the right consistency, the female will then start laying her eggs. And because frogs and toads practice external fertilization, so that means that the female lays the eggs, and while the male is clasped to her, he'll deposit his sperm over the top of the egg. So it's not internal fertilization, which we see with most animals. And all those tiny little eggs will land up in the middle of that foam, and that's where they'll stay for less than a week, and they start to develop. And then once they develop into little wriggly tadpoles, then they'll drop down, oops, into the water, and then continue with their development. I see there's a couple of questions coming through here. Um, and then I see Hazel, you said, do all foam nest frogs have the same color foam? Yes, for the most part, it's a white. Sometimes, well, as it starts to dry, it's kind of off color, like a yellowish sort of shade, but really not too much more than that. I think it also just depends on the dirt mix up in the oviducal secretion. Um, there's that's something, but for the most part, it's white.
Nurture your connection with nature with our weekly newsletter. Become an explorer and receive the latest word from the wild in your inbox. Catch up with your favorite WildEarth characters. Watch the week's memorable wildlife encounters. Stay up to date with the happenings and what to expect from WildEarth. Sign up today and get the best seats on the largest safari vehicle in the world. WildEarth, connecting with nature.
Well, there's so many of you that have joined, so I'm just going to quickly say a big thank you to all of you. So we've got Honey Badger. You've actually mentioned that you hope my dog Tucker is happy to have me home. He has. He has not left my side, although I was convinced he wasn't going to want to come home because he was so spoiled with friends of mine. Terrence, you're also on board. Hello, Terrence. And then Cagney, hello to you. Hazel, of course, I said hello to you and answered your question just now. Thanks again. Ask me more questions, Hazel. And then Patisse, hello. And Swifty, hello to all of you too. If I have missed anybody, I'm very sorry. It's just it's so good to have so many of you watching. I hope that you're all not back at work just yet, and you've got a couple more days just to enjoy the freedom and the start of this new year. Here's a great question from Marissa. You said that you're looking forward to the next couple of hours. Thank you. And now your question is, what are the biggest challenges facing the South African natural world besides poaching? So this is kind of universal, Marissa. One of the biggest problems is habitat loss, essentially, and not just necessarily wild spaces, being fenced off, like fragmented from the rest of these big wilderness areas for cities to develop, but also deforestation and anything along those lines. Big water sources, so like for example rivers being dammed up, stopping the natural flow. These are all problems that we often overlook. Now, it's a tricky one, right? Because we as humans, we're also here, we live on this planet, and we're a highly intelligent species, and we need to survive. But what we unfortunately, and I mean, this is common knowledge, we don't realize the damage, well, people at least are starting to realize it now, how much damage we've actually done to the natural world. And one of the biggest problems that I'm trying to make people more aware of is the implications of damming rivers and then also with agriculture, basically funneling whatever water is available in these river systems. And then again, maybe I suppose cordoning off a section, getting it to run into a dam, or just actually draining the water source completely. It's really sad to see how many rivers are now no longer flowing. Of course, river courses change. It all really depends on how much rain we get and that type of thing. But the impact that agriculture has actually had is quite sad. And now because we've fragmented these wild spaces with fences, whatever the case may be, cities, towns, communities, there's it's very difficult for animals to find fresh water. So it's kind of this like knock-on effect. In these big open ecosystems, animals are having to travel further and further to find water. But what I imagine is happening is they're hitting a lot of areas that they would normally find water, and now there's not water there. So again, I always talk about the amazing work that is being done by conservation organizations trying to reopen natural corridors, and this will, of course, alleviate the pressure, on certain water systems. So so I hope that, yeah, I hope that I mean, never mind just animals not having water to drink, you're stopping the natural migration of fish. That's a big one. We forget that fish exist in these rivers, and how are they supposed to get from point A to B? And if you dam off an area, yes, of course, fish can naturally be repopulated, whether it's eggs that are being attached by birds and they're being transported that way, or, of course, then it takes people having to interfere and reintroduce fish species. Is the quality of water good enough? Are there enough amphibian species? What insects are also living in the water? So it's just that makes me a little bit sad. But so that's, I mean, we can go on and on for the next 4 hours actually talking about this type of thing. And there's lots of different things. So I just thought I'd maybe mention the water crisis that is also going. But then there's a lot of good that people are doing. I mean, in East Africa, there's a project, and for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of this project. I'll have to go and look up at again. But in these areas that are basically become almost like deserts, very arid. There's not a lot of ground cover in the form of vegetation anymore. Whether it's because it's overgrazing or just climate change, weather patterns, not getting enough rain. But of course, when you have no ground cover, where does the water go? Right? It just kind of runs off. So there's these big projects where they're digging, sorry, these semicircle uh, depressions. And when it rains, they fill up, and then the natural vegetation starts to grow around them. And they put so many, and it's like literally transformed. And I just read an article that in the last year, over 3.5 million trees have come back just by digging these half moon shapes into the ground. And I thought that's quite spectacular. That's such an easy thing to do. It's really just manual labor there that is being utilized. So people are getting people in and around the communities to help with projects like this. So I thought that was quite interesting and maybe something that the rest of the world could potentially look at too. It seems to be working well in that area. Oh, here's some more questions. Sorry, I do this. I always do all the talking. Oh, okay, Patricia. You've also just joined in. Welcome, welcome. And then Grace, you've asked if there are any mining sites near Juma. So not that I'm aware of. So a lot of the mining in South Africa and specifically like this Lowveld area takes place outside of Hoedspruit, not far from where the Sabi sand is. But you got to head all the way to Hoedspruit and then you got to head further west and north. So around Palabora, there's a lot of mining. I think there's copper, there's magnetite, there's a lot of mica. There's the emerald rich area around here, around Palabora, between Palabora and Hoedspruit and the surrounding areas. So there is quite a bit. I know that there's been some petitions against big mining companies wanting to take over wild spaces, but thankfully, people bound together and have stopped this. Some areas have even become like sort of historical sites to try and prevent any further mining from happening in the future. So with the Kruger National Park, with maybe the Manuleti, the Timbavati Thorny Bush, the Sabi Sand all being around there and being prominent wilderness areas, it's highly unlikely that mining will pop up. But again, you never know, and we know that corruption is unfortunately real all over the world, and I suppose anything is possible. So fingers crossed that they don't come into our wilderness areas. There's some horror stories if you start to read up about fracking that's going on all over Africa. There's some horror stories of iconic wilderness areas in Botswana where fracking is taking place and it's being allowed. I mean, outside the Lower Zambezi National Park, there's a more eastern corner a couple of years ago. There was a mine that was wanting to be sort of put up to start. I can't remember what they were going to be mining there. It must have been copper or something. And then thankfully, everybody that has their finger in the Lower Zambezi National Park put that to a stop completely. So that was amazing. The power of people is fantastic.
Welcome to Eco Training Pridelands Conservancy. Hey, Susan, no. Oh, look at her, she's absolutely gorgeous. Look at these two pushing each other.
Oh, it's so great to see the resident grey heron. I often see it walking around the water's edge, sometimes going for the occasional swim, and then, of course, perched up on the top of a tree like this. And just touching back on what I was kind of talking about, how important it is to preserve water sources and to not excessively dam up rivers, whatever the case may be. Something like simple, right? I say simple, but we know how important every single organism in this world is to the ecosystem, well, to a healthy, functional ecosystem. And herons play an important part in that, or just birds in general. So let's use this bird as an example, seeing as though it spends most of its time around the waterhole. Yes, of course, they adapt and they're opportunistic and they can feed on anything and everything. Snakes, rats, mice, all sorts. But for the most part, they do fish and they also catch amphibians and anything else that's kind of in the water. So I think it might fly just now. So I saw that leopard lover. You said that you're quite worried about the runoff of basically from mines, and that is a really big problem. I don't think a lot of people quite understand the impact that the runoff from mines can actually cause. So if you don't know, uh, obviously, when rocks are exposed to various minerals and elements, as you can imagine, and when you've got these big not construction sites, but these big mines, these heavy machines that are constantly bringing up rocks from lower down in the earth and kind of exposing them to the surface. You get something called acid mine drainage. So essentially, the water becomes more acidic than what it normally would be. With heavy metals, it's got sulfates and a variety of other toxic substances that can then, of course, harm the various aquatic ecosystems. And by doing that, you can imagine that the water quality is going to go down. It's not going to be what it should be. The other thing that also happens is that more sediment is introduced into these aquatic ecosystems, and that can literally smother habitats. It also disrupts the food chain, and then the clarity of the water also decreases. And all of these together can have a huge impact on basically the quality of water. And we see that happening in a lot of waterways in South Africa, even in uh, uh, the Kruger National Park, that type of thing. Sorry, you see a monkey. Oh, wait, was it monkey? Otherwise, I shall release Tucker. Not that he'll do anything; he just chases them. It's the only animals that let my dog chase is the monkeys because they just come in and wreck the house. So he's my security system for that. So yeah, so that's a bit sad. So you can imagine something like a heron that would just happily be fishing, catching everything, eating, none the wiser. Firstly, A could become incredibly sick, or the species of fish and anything else that's living in it could eventually just die, which is really sad. And if you don't have organisms in water, they're responsible for helping purify the water. I mean, there's lots of creatures that feed on the microorganisms. It's all important. You can't have one without the other. So that's a bit of a problem. Not a bit of a problem, a really big problem. But there are the people that are, there are people that are activists and trying to handle these types of situations. I'm, of course, in no position to be able to do anything like that. Here we go. Oh, hi, Sarah. It's great to hear from you too. Welcome, welcome. I hope you had a happy new year. And then Penelope, you're asking about crested barbets and how do they make their calls. Oh my goodness, sorry. I believe that none of that actually went through. I don't know what happened. Might be the dodgy internet. Let me try that again. Sorry. It always happens. Sorry, Penelope. So this is one of the special adaptations for barbets, and quite often when you hear barbets calling, it kind of sounds like one continuous call, um, which is amazing because you're just kind of like, how on earth is it? Why is it not breathing? Is it taking a breath? For those of you that have never heard a crested barbacore, I'll play it for you just now, and then you'll kind of understand what I mean. So instead of just having two sources of, air, like for example, like us, um, they have not two. Instead of having one source of air like us, they've got two, and that's thanks to their box, or if you want a better term, the syrinx is another word for it. So essentially, both lungs are working and they can keep the air flowing continuously. So that's why that noise sort of comes out in one go. So while one lung is breathing in, the other one is breathing out, if that kind of makes sense, which is really great. And then as the as those vibrations are well, sorry, not as those vibrations. What's wrong with me? As as the air is being forced from the lungs, and then over those air sacs, those the membranes of the syrinx start to vibrate, and that's essentially how it is produced. But that's the special adaptation that they have is two air sacs versus just one. Let me play the call. Hang on, let me just quickly find it for a second. Go into here. I don't know how long it's going to be on my phone. The app that I do doesn't typically play. Let's go sound. I can't play it too loudly though because there are a lot of crested barbets where I live, and this is something that's also important to remember: is to not play bird calls too loudly because you'll be surprised as to how birds are actually affected, and they are territorial. But let's see. Let's just see if this is a normal song. Actually, no. I have to turn my headphones off. So there we go. That is the call of a crested barbet. Let me just quickly get back and connected so that I can chat to Nadine. Nadine's directing the Waterhole show today. There we go. I'm back. Oh, and then there was an amazing question earlier about insects. I have to scroll. Oh, there we go. Grayson, you said, are there any ways that you can boost insect life around your home? Absolutely. And it's actually really simple. It's not necessarily something that's going to cost you a lot of money. So I don't know, Grayson, if you perhaps have a garden of some kind, and even if you don't, it doesn't really matter. But just by introducing a couple of indigenous plants, and if you can introduce flowering plants, that's even better. Obviously, there's different insects out there, and they all feed on various plant species. So yeah. So if you can just put a couple of nice flowering plants, you'll get the bees to come back. Maybe flies. I know not everybody wants flies around, and even though they're not my favorite creature, although I love them because they're so fascinating, that they do annoy me. Uh, that they're all part of and important for the ecosystem. So things like that would be the easiest, the most I think affordable way to do it. A couple of pot plants here and there if you can get some that are. I suppose it depends where you live, but if you live in a fairly warm climate and you can keep them going all year round, even better. So that's literally what I would do. That's it. Just as simple as that. And then, Evelyn, you've asked if there are any insects that I would still like to see. There's so many. I don't even think I could list them all. There's quite a few jumping spider species that I'd like to see. One beetle that has been, well, one arthropod, sorry, that has been eluding me is a Picasso bug. I have not seen one of those. If you have Google them, they're strange looking creatures. So yeah, there's so many. I actually just also ordered. I know these are not necessarily insects, but I ordered a new spider book, which I'm so excited about because there's so many spider species that I have never seen before. I'm sure they've been around and I just haven't noticed them, and I've been struggling to identify them. So I cannot wait. I think that book actually arrives on Friday. Bring it. So I'll be obsessed with spiders for a little bit. And then there's so many ants that I want to see. And there's an ant book called Ants of Southern Africa. I think the author is Peter Spilby. I do stand to be corrected. And sadly, his book is no longer in print. And you can't find it anywhere. So that is a book that I'd also like to get, because it'll just help with identifying of different ant species. And yeah, I think that they're fascinating. In fact, ants are one of my favorite arthropods. I really, really enjoy watching them and just seeing them go about their day. If I think of any other bugs, I don't actually have a bug wish list. Well, I mean, I do. Every time I see something new, I'm like, oh, I really want to see that. But I need to start writing them down so I can keep them on track. And what I should actually do is have a look and see which ones around here I could potentially see. That would make it, and then where I'd more than likely find them. But I've been quite sad. I've said this a couple of times on the live safaris. I cannot believe that there aren't that many insects around, which for me is concerning. I know we haven't had that much rain. There's plenty of dung beetles, which is awesome, like the flies. The bees are about. I just haven't seen as many beetles as we typically do, and other little things here and there. No, hardly any caterpillar species, and I've been looking. I really have been searching. I'm a part of these Facebook groups, and I get caterpillar envy. I know that sounds completely ridiculous. Everyone's like, my tree's covered in these things, and I'm like, why can't they be covering my trees? Please, bring them here. Obviously, we don't move insects, I suppose, like anything, where if they only occur in one area, we shouldn't be just introducing them into random places, unless they've historically occurred there. It's a little bit on the quiet side. These are great perches. Sometimes you see a kingfisher sitting here in these trees, just kind of waiting. So this is the amazing work of being a zoomie, controlling the cameras and finding all sorts of crazy little things.
As we race towards 2024, we need to repair or replace quite a bit of technical equipment. We'd also like to expand into other wilderness areas, and for that, we need Starlink. We want to make 2024 the best in WildEarth's history. In the next 7 days, we're going to run a donation drive to try and raise $15,000 US. This will go a long way to helping us continue with our mission to connect people with nature.
Well, we're just watching a couple of virtual starlings bounding from tree to tree. We are seeing a lot of starlings around at the moment. It's great. There's a couple that we don't normally see all year round, like the violet-backed starlings, which are great. But then I'm wondering if this pair of virtual starlings could be nesting in this log in the left here. Firstly, you can see it's been split open. I don't know if it was lightning that struck this tree and caused it to break, or of course it could just be elephants or maybe termites got into it and it's just slowly, deteriorating, and branches are just breaking because of the weight of them. Who knows? But they nest in sort of cavities within trees. And if you look just below, yeah, they're definitely nesting in the top. There's even a round hole. But that's probably from something like a barbet or a woodpecker that has created that. So it's kind of hard to see, but I imagine that there must be some kind of cover in here, in sort of the fork of that tree. It'll be interesting to see what it actually looks, and then they'll line it with leaves. You can see them flying in and out with food, which is awesome. Really amazing to see. We've been so fortunate to have seen so many different birds nesting and the rearing of their chicks and then watching them fledge. It's all a part of nature. And that's, of course, what keeps the show going, right? When the animals aren't around. When I was at Juma now, it was probably the quietest game viewing I have ever experienced in my entire life in the Sabi Sand. I couldn't believe it. I saw 2 leopards in 2 weeks. I know that sounds like, oh, Taylor, that's pretty good. But for the Sabi Sand, that's not great. Obviously, the traverse is limited. And so that really dictates where what we can and can't see all the time. And at first I thought it was me. I was like, oh, I'm just completely useless. I can't find animals. And then thankfully Gabe was having a quiet spell too. And it was just quite tricky trying to figure out where they are. And then what else was I going to say to you? Oh, I've completely forgotten. But then Shiv, you've actually said that Gabe scared all the animals off this morning. Not surprised. Was he singing? Because if he was singing, good luck. You're not going to see animals for the next week. You can tell him that I said that. He's not ashamed to belt it out. He did sing a couple of songs for, a while I was there with him. It was quite entertaining. I'm so fascinated about these starlings going in and out. The adults hard at work. Never really seen inside the nest of a starling, but that's of course because of where they typically nest, in cavities of trees. And they don't make their own holes. They rely on other creatures, whether it's a tree splitting like that one, or a barbet or a woodpecker actually perfectly creating a hole in the side of it, or in the trunk of a tree, whatever is available. But there's, in these knob thorns, there's so many different birds. I mean, we've got all the buffalo weavers that, of course, are nesting. We always hear them. And then everything else in between. David, you asked, which nest structure do I find the most fascinating? I was actually talking about this the other day. I really love the structure of sunbird nests. And it's not that they're anything like, impressive or magnificent. It's not quite like a hammerkop nest, right? I mean, that's spectacular on its own. I just absolutely love, and I also love this. There's a lot of different bird species that do this, but I'm going to just talk about the ones I've been seeing a lot of. So, sunbirds, and then the African paradise flycatchers. The way that they create their nest is slightly different because it's more of like sort of quite a saggy mess that dangles off of a branch for a sunbird, whereas it's the polar opposite for an African paradise flycatcher. They make these beautiful but petite cup nests. But what they both have in common is how they disguise their nests to almost look like absolutely nothing, like it's just part of the environment. So the little tiny neat cup nests that the flycatcher makes, it looks like a knot in a tree. It's just enough for the belly of the bird to fit into it. The tail kind of sticks out. So that's great. They use spider webs and moss and all sorts of things. And then the same thing goes with the sunbird, except they have like this little flap that creates a secret tunnel, a secret little entrance. And again, it just looks like a bunch of spider webs with leaves that have been attached to it. It's remarkable. And you'll drive past it not thinking anything of it. Maybe you go, oh, it's a community spider nest. But in fact, it's not. And I had such a I don't even know when I last had a sunbird sighting like this while we were alive. We were actually sitting on the dam wall here at Gari Dam and we watched I'm assuming it was a courtship process between a Mariko sunbird, a male and female. And right next to the car, I think we must have had about a 10-minute sighting of it. It was just next level. It was so spectacular. So if you didn't catch that, maybe there is a highlight of it. You can head over and check it out. Maybe someone will share the link of that sighting. It was also spectacular. I hate to say this, but I'm starting to get more and more into birding without even really realizing it. Sorry, there's an aeroplane flying overhead. I'm just going to mute my feed. Oh, there we go, that's better. Shiv, you said that the starlings that we were just looking at look a lot bigger than the starlings in the UK, and you've asked, are they in the same family or are they just the same name but a completely different bird? So no, they're in the same family, but different species. So you're probably thinking of the European or common starling. Tucker. Sorry, everybody. I forgot to mute before I blurted out my dog's name. So yes, so yeah, different species. So the Birchall starlings are quite big. The Birchalls and the Meave starlings in Africa, they're the ones with the long tails, well, in South Africa, and they're the biggest species. We don't really have anything that looks like a European starling. We do occasionally see the European starlings, not all the time, for the most part, not out in the wilderness areas, and yeah, they're black and they've got like these white flecks all over them. There's nothing else. None of the starling species in South Africa, at least, that look that way. But that's why it's so important, and there's this huge drive all over the world now to sort of standardize the common names so that there isn't an overlap. Like if we have something called a common starling, it could essentially be 3 different types of starlings. And so they're trying to get better at that. But if you're ever wanting to, get the most accurate answer, the best thing to do is going to be to Google the scientific name and of the different, say, bird species, and then you'll be able to kind of go from there. But it's a mouthful, and for the most part, normal people like me, we don't really remember the scientific names of birds. There's only one scientific bird name that I know, and that's a secretary bird, and because I learned the taxonomic breakdown when I first started guiding for the taxonomy section, we had to basically do it for a bird, a plant, a mammal, and I think a reptile too. So naturally, I learned that, and now I've never forgotten it. Now this random information that I very rarely speak about just lives in my head.
As we race towards 2024, we need to repair or replace quite a bit of technical equipment. We'd also like to expand into other wilderness areas, and for that, we need Starlink. We want to make 2024 the best in WildEarth's history. In the next 7 days, we're going to run a donation drive to try and raise $15,000 US. This will go a long way to helping us continue with our mission to connect people with nature.
So it's a little bit on the quiet side. We're still looking for wildlife. Most of the other cameras are also quiet. I think we want to just spend it at Juma. It's a favorite place. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And even though we can't see much, there's a lot to listen to. And then just touching back on the frogs, we were talking about the foam nest frog earlier. Waylon, you've asked, how long does it take for most frog or toad eggs to hatch? It's normally about a week. It's typically not a very long process. You know, a lot of the amphibious creatures do rely on water. Of course, there's plenty of exceptions as well. And with exceptional heat that is normally associated in the summer months in southern Africa, or just in general, right? It's important that it happens quickly, because the water is just going to evaporate. Look at what's going on right now. We haven't been receiving much rain, and we're very fortunate that over the last couple of years we've had excessive amounts of rain, so the water holes are quite full. But any frog that is making use of a natural pool in the form of a puddle or a wallow, with there not being much rain topping it up frequently, they're going to find themselves in a spot of trouble. And those tadpoles might not even make it and complete their metamorphosis to becoming adults. And then the process from a tadpole to an adult takes slightly longer. It might take a couple of weeks. But it's a great experiment if you've got children, or you'd say that I actually did this not too long ago. I collected eggs and watched them develop, and it was something that I did as a young kid. You just have to make sure to continuously change the water up, and that the water doesn't get too hot. It's another thing that's also quite important, and that they have access to food. I'm starting to see lots of ripples. Hippopotamus, I don't know how many of you are in here, but could you all come out of the water and start grazing? That would be very nice. You see them out of the water quite often during the day, especially on days like today. Oh, Canadian Anne, you said that you usually fast asleep during the Waterhole show, but now you're having trouble sleeping. I'm just going to start calling you Taylor from now on, because that is the story of my life, not being able to sleep. At least you have got something to fall back on. And hopefully the sounds of nature are great. It looks like the Zuma camera is just sticking a little bit. If it does carry on like this, we might head over to one of the other water holes. But there we go, it's coming back now. There we go, much better, much better. There's one hippo head. There he goes under. You know, this is something that I have never really been able to wrap my head around, and I surely I cannot be the only one. You hear a lot of people talking about being able to sex hippos while they're in the water, right? If it's a mother and a calf, that's pretty easy to do. But I've heard, and where individuals will say that female hippos have got sort of pink around their eyes and males don't. But I don't know. I don't think that this is necessarily 100% true, because especially if you look at younger male hippos, right? They've also got pink. So I think it's incredibly difficult. I mean, size, of course, can matter. We know that hippo bulls are, especially a big dominant bull, they are exceptional and much larger than the females. So even just looking at head size can help you with that. But I just find it tricky. So I'm always quite hesitant to go, oh, that's a male and that's a female, until I can actually see the bits that make a male, and a female, a female. and Canadian, you've said, going back again to the tadpoles and specifically talking about the foam nest frog nest that we were looking at earlier, you said, have I seen the tadpoles dropping into the water from a nest? I have, and only once. Can you believe it? It was at Pridelands at St. Lovely Dam, and we desperately tried to show it live. We moved around as much as we could, but we were quite close to the water's edge, and we just couldn't quite get enough signal essentially to go live with it, which I was devastated about. But I did share a video on Twitter a long time ago, it must be a couple of years now, and it was spectacular. I was so enthralled with the sighting. So they just get heavier and heavier, and they obviously start to wriggle around, and then they just pop out the bottom. It was crazy to see, and lots of them. I mean, they don't all just fall out at once. It's kind of like one at a time, two at a time, that type of thing. But again, not all the eggs are going to develop at the same pace, so it's quite a stagnated process. And then having the opportunity to look inside a foam nest that had already hatched, just seeing how many eggs were actually left over. And that's because a female will lay over 1,000 eggs in one go. So it's a good thing that not all of them survive. There we go, hippo with your oxpecker friends. Oh, I don't really know if they're so much your friends. Sometimes they're a nuisance. But using the hippo as an opportunity to safely drink water without really having to worry about too many aerial predators. This is a red-billed oxpecker. But as you know, WildEarth, of course, is heavily dependent at the moment on donations from all our wonderful viewers. And can you believe that over $51,000 has already been raised? It's exceeded the original request of 15,000 US dollars, which is amazing. And if I'm not mistaken, it is the last day today. I think that it basically ends tomorrow. So thank you very much to all of you who have donated. And if you would like to donate still, you can head over to the WildEarth website and look out for the donations tab and do so there. Every little bit counts, and WildEarth wants to continue showcasing wildlife from across the world to the comfort of your own home, and they really need your help. So again, if you have donated, thank you so much. If you aren't able to, of course, we're just thankful for your loyal support and viewership. And the oxpeckers flew off, and it sounded like the striated heron also made a dash for it. Let's see if we can find it. Oh, and then Matthew asked, can oxpeckers swim? I've never seen one swimming before. However, even though they don't have webbed toes, right, like something like a duck, which definitely helps them, they do have a level of buoyancy to them. So if they were to flop into the water, they'd definitely be able to do some kind of a pedaling, a stroke with their wings to make it back to, well, hopefully to get to the edge of the water and be able to walk out like that. I don't know if they'd be able to take off if they were to fall in the water. I don't know if they'd be able to generate enough uplift to get them to do that. But again, it's not something that I've necessarily seen. I haven't seen it. So that's kind of just my guess. But I imagine that everything can swim. I mean, I didn't know that ostriches could swim. And somebody sent me a picture and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Nadine just said, did you just say that an ostrich was swimming at Pridelands? Oh, wow, that's incredible. Oh, that's awesome. So there we go. Or I suppose most birds like water. May need to drink and to cool themselves off and to keep themselves nice and clean. But fascinating nonetheless. I've never seen an ostrich in deep water before, but I've added that to my bucket bird list sightings. Hippopotamus, you're looking like you might be a bit playful. Are you going to thrash around in the water for us? while we hopefully wait for the hippo to put on a show for us, I see Casey Quadazi have asked about safari online courses, and that you're really interested. Oh, this is an amazing thing. The pandemic obviously was, oh, what a sad time, hey? And honestly didn't think that I was going to see a pandemic in my lifetime. Um, but what that did though for online courses, especially in wildlife, it really just changed the game, and so many organizations, took advantage of this to make, I suppose, the materials, the education materials, available to more people. And so many people want to do wildlife courses, but a lot of the time it requires you to come out in person and do a practical with a combination of a theory kind of experience. But reality, you're working, so you don't really have time to do that. And I had to take 35 days off of, or 55 days off of work to come and do a safari guide course. So there are many different options, Casey. You can literally just pop it into a Safari Guide online courses, and a number of different organizations will pop up, and you can choose them. I highly recommend Eco Training's online courses. I think that they're very well done. They were designed really beautifully, and there's a bunch of different ones you can kind of choose from. They don't have to be as in depth. You might not have to do an exam at the end with some of them, but more just like kind of more like a nature enthusiast course. So go and check those out. But again, there's lots. You just got to do a bit of research, and I think that that's a good start. But there's so many. I think Wildlife Campus also offers a host of different courses of various kinds. Hmm. Okay. I think what we're going to do is we're going to head over to Jamala for a quick visit and see what's happening in Madikwe. Oh, look, the go-away bird right up on top of a tree. Uh, Danny, you also just said that you're just popping on quickly to say hello. You're lurking while you watch. Thank you for popping in to say hello. Glad that we can keep you company, and hopefully your spirits high too. There we go. Beautiful go-away bird. Looks like it's quite windy in Madikwe today. A really nice close-up of the hills in the background, and a starling that has also now joined the scene. There we go. So Nadine says she's just turned the ambient sound down a little bit, because otherwise we're just going to hear whoosh, which is never a fun time. So don't worry too much about that. If we do hear anything interesting, we'll take a listen and have a look. So Justin, right? You've said hello, Taylor. Hello, Justin. You've asked if I'll be instructing again. I know. I don't highly doubt it. I I've kind of moved on from guide training in South Africa. I'd like to do a lot more guide training and being involved in community projects. And then I do some guide training outside of South Africa, where I go into lodges and work on fine tuning the skills of already established guides, which is one of my favorite things to do. Although I do miss training, there is a lot of aspects of it that I don't particularly enjoy. And I'm sure this goes with everything, right? There's always just a couple of individuals that end up ruining it for everybody. And sadly, sometimes it's kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth to do training in South Africa. But there is desperate need for training outside of this wonderful country, where they don't have the caliber of guides that South Africa produces. So being able to go out and impart my knowledge and experiences, and try and help lodges figure out, where they can improve, and that's like my favorite thing to do. So I really am enjoying a lot of that.
We all know the struggle of finding the perfect gift. But what if you could give them an unforgettable experience? Something truly extraordinary. Introducing Nature Eye. Fly a real drone remotely at iconic locations, witnessing the beauty of nature like never before. Sign up to be an explorer and you could win one of these experiences yourself. Visit natureeye.com today.
Oh, finally, an elephant at Jamala. I was going to say, that's weird, right, to have a day with no elephants at this wonderful waterhole. And I know, Catherine, you reached out and you said that you hope that you see some elephants today because it would have been your dad's birthday and he loved it. And intrepid safari goer during his life. So here we go. This elephant is for your dad. A lovely bull, though, just having a casual drink. Not really up to too much. So I'm so thankful that there's so many of you that have really been chatting away and asking questions. Sorry if I have missed any of them. Uh, Please don't hold it against me. It's been incredible so far, and I hope we keep the momentum up. So this is a live and interactive. Sorry if you have just joined us. And all you need to do to chat to me is you can either use Twitter or X, whichever one you prefer to call it. I think I'll call it Twitter for probably the rest of my life. Remember to hashtag WildEarth for us to be able to see the questions. And then you can head over to the WildEarth website itself and ask questions there. Is it a stork? It looks like there's a yellow-billed stork at the back, I think, literally directly behind the elephant on the other side of the waterhole. We're going to have a close look at it now. It is indeed a yellow-billed stork. Oh, look at its lovely two-toned legs that you can see. Red on the top half and then brownish down below. That could probably just be from it wading through the water and some sediment is stuck to their legs. But normally what we see with storks is that they predominantly have white legs. Not that that's the coloration of the skin, but they are frequently urinating. Obviously, they've got a cloaca and they produce urine and feces all in one go, and it will basically drip down onto their legs. We call it urohydrosis, and by painting, if you will, their legs in that white uric acid secretion, it definitely helps cool them down by reflecting the light rather than absorbing it. Very clever technique. I don't know if I'd like to do that though. I'm glad that humans don't do that. But having a sleep, it looks like it's even swaying a little bit, neck all pulled in. Also not doing too much. It's a very quiet day at Jamala, but maybe it's going to get busier and busier as the day warms up. There we go, Shiv. You said that's quite the stark waterhole. You're quite right. And then you've asked what the stork would be feeding on here. So yellow-billed storks are they're unbelievable at fishing. They are so interesting to watch. And again, just like a lot of the other aquatic bird species, they have various ways that they hunt. So they're not just limited to hunting in one fashion, which definitely could restrict what you can catch. So they'll wade around the water, normally moving their heads from side to side with their beaks wide open. And then yeah, then clamping down on fish is one of my favorite things. And they're smart. They'll often target smaller pools of water. This makes it a bit easier. Obviously, if there anything in there that it can eat. So fish, frogs, it'll eat a crab if it can catch one. Again, pretty much anything. But right now, not too interested in feasting at all. It almost looks like it's a little bit on the cold side, how it's all fluffed up. And perhaps the birds are like, Us as humans, right? We get so used to, we get acclimatized to the weather, and then in these areas, when it drops below 25 degrees Celsius, we'll freeze. Funny how that happens, right? Oh, cool. Helmet's a guinea fowl. Hello. Now, it's actually ridiculous because now the guinea fowl looks like it's almost the same size as the stork, but it's nowhere near the size um, of them. I mean, those storks, it doesn't look like it. They stand at almost a meter in height, and a guinea fowl stands just under 60 centimeters. So that's 2 rulers put together. And I don't know why it's alarming now. I suppose just coming out into the open, being near a waterhole, you're a bit exposed. Looks a bit lost. Guinea fowl always are lost, though. They don't strike me as being the most intelligent bird species. I think that they're the sheep of birds. So very much flock mentality. But now at this time, we're not really seeing them in big groups. We've seen them split up. So it's breeding season. So we're seeing them mainly in pairs. It's not to say that you can't see them in a flock, though, at this time of the year.
As we race towards 2024, we need to repair or replace quite a bit of technical equipment. We'd also like to expand into other wilderness areas, and for that, we need Starlink. We want to make 2024 the best in WildEarth's history. In the next 7 days, we're going to run a donation drive to try and raise $15,000 US. This will go a long way to helping us continue with our mission to connect people with nature.
Isn't this such a funny scene to see one helmeted guinea fowl with a yellow-billed stork? I don't think it wants to be on its own, and I think that's why it's moved around and lingering around the stork, although the stork's not showing any interest in it. The guinea fowl happily pecking away, feasting on seeds and anything else that it can find. I wonder where the rest of the perhaps one of the guinea fowl individuals is sitting on eggs, and that's why this one is here by itself. What is the stork doing? Now it's got one leg up, but not quite resting it like they typically do. Unusual. Yes. Are you going to bring your leg all the way up? You're actually going, there we go. You're not in water. You don't need to stealthily move. And obviously, when they're hunting around in water and wading in the water, should I say, they put one foot down very carefully to not create too much ripples in the water and disturb any food. The guinea fowl, I think, is panicking that the stork might leave it and then it's on its own. It's just sort of chatting away. That poor stork just wanting to have a sleep and peace, and now it's being circled by the guinea fowl, and it's also constantly chatting. But as you know, it's almost time for AfriCam to join us, which will give us a whole bunch of other cameras to have a look at. So hopefully the game viewing does improve in a little bit. That's going to start, I think, in about almost 10 seconds or so. So I can't wait to see what it has to offer. Oh my gosh, look at all the wildlife here now.